hey, let's prepare our project for production and then deploy it so that way anyone with the URL can use the blockchain and cryptocurrency application that we built. So for this project, we're going to use Heroku for deployment services. It's a really great option since it's free for development purposes. All right, so you're going to need to install Heroku on your system and look up install Heroku. Now, as part of this, you're going to want to make a Heroku account. So if in the top right, you don't see an icon over here, that is because you still need to create a Heroku account. You'll likely see a sign up button. Then go ahead and click sign up, go through the process. You'll also have to go through a confirmation email to fully complete and create your account. Another thing that you're going to need is Git. So look up install Git if you don't already have Git on your operating system. This git sem/book page is great for installing Git. It has installation instructions for Linux, Mac, Windows, and any other operating system that you need. All right, and now on the command line, let's go ahead and prepare our project for production. First up, we're going to want to initialize a Git project within the crypto chain directory. So run git init. If you don't have Git, you can always check with git ---- version, in which case you'll want to install it with those directions we just saw. The next thing you'll want to do is log into Heroku with the Heroku login command and use the credentials that you used online, so that way your system is set up with your Heroku credentials right here on the OS. And then what you'll want to do is you'll want to create a Heroku project for this. So run Heroku create. Your generated application name is going to be different, but it'll say creating app done, and then it'll include an application name. So for example, mine is Thawing Tundra 11851. Now, most of the names that I find for Heroku generated ones are pretty cool. Thawing Tundra, it's all right. Okay, the next thing that we want to do for this Heroku application is to enable Redis on this. Now, the way this is going to work is that notice how when we run the application locally, it starts up on the localhost environment, and we're able to access our own local Redis server. Well, when we deploy this production, our application code is going to be running on a Node.js enabled system somewhere in the cloud. And then Heroku is going to enable us to access that remote machine by giving us a public URL that we can access to use that Node.js application services. So for us, we're going to make our crypto chain server and our Express server run somewhere remotely. But it's still going to need a Redis server on that same machine that it can connect to in order to do all that real-time networking that we set up locally as well. Now, in order to enable Redis, you have to add your credit card credentials or some kind of payment information on Heroku, but don't worry, the Redis add-on is free. And I don't recommend going beyond anything where you end up having to pay because there's other options when it comes to this case. But we're using Heroku Redis because it's an add-on that is extremely quick to configure and easy to understand while in development. And to do this, we run Heroku add-ons create, and then Heroku Redis. Hobby Dev is the free version. We run -a for the application name. And again, for me, it's Thawing Tundra 11851. You might have gotten a cooler name like Fierce Walls or something. You know, something better than thawing. But anyway, the output that you'll see is that a Redis instance is now being created in the background of the application. Now, this is a deceptively bad name, Redis closed. This doesn't mean that Redis has been closed. That just happens to be the name of the instance for the Redis server that is being started on this machine. Now, definitely run this Heroku add-ons info command, and you should find the state of your Redis server on there. The price is free and the state is created. All right, that's great. So open up the project on your code editor. All right, and head to the package.json file. The way Heroku is going to work is that it'll detect that it has a Node.js application configured. It'll look at the dependencies section and then install all these libraries. So it's definitely necessary to see all of these libraries configured on here with the correct key names as well as the version values. Once you're confident that everything looks good, head up. And then Heroku will look to the start command in order to run the application. In this case, it's going to run npm run build client and node index.js. Now what we want to do is we want to make a distinguishment between the regular dev command and the start command for our actual code. And to do that, we're going to set an environment variable called env. So cross-env allows us to create an environment variable. And in this case, let's have one called env, which will set the environment to development when we're running the dev command. We're going to do the same thing for the dev peer command. And notice that we already have a cross-env call. So we can shorten this to running env equals development like so. All right. The key here is that we want to block certain code within our application from running when it recognizes that the process environment is indeed development. Another key change to make is that when it comes to our start command, first up, Heroku is going to run npm run build client, but it only gives us 60 seconds to connect to the main port of the Express application. So one thing we can do is allow both of these commands to run simultaneously by only having the single ampersand operator, which will fire npm run build client in the background to allow the node index.js start to take over. Okay, and now in node index.js, we need to make a couple key changes. First up, at the top of the application, let's make an overall constant of isDevelopment, which will check whether process.env.screenCaseEnv is equal to development. And this allows us to now run checks throughout the code to block certain code from running in this environment. Now, the first thing that we definitely want to block while in development is our seeding application data code. So let's wrap all this code where we're seeding the application data with transactions and blocks within an if is development check. So if is development, we'll check if that is true. Then we're allowed to run all of this code. Let's go ahead and indent everything within here and then wrap it in within an overall if condition check for is development. A second key important change is to set the process port to process.env.port. The reason that we want to do this is that when it comes to our application, we want to make sure that Heroku has control over the overall port. By default, we're making our ports 3000, but that is not necessarily the port that Heroku will expose for our Express application over the public address. But it will use the process.env.port in order to serve the overall application. Therefore, our Express server needs to listen at the same location. So make sure to have the process.env.port. All right, we're almost there. Another key change is making sure that we connect to the remote Redis server. So right now we're going to be using the local Redis server by default. But when we added this Heroku Redis add-on, we actually created a remote Redis server, and we can find out its address by running Heroku config, and then let's grep for the Redis address. And this outputs our Redis URL. So this is the entire Redis address of that remote Redis server that is tied to our overall remote Redis application. So copy that entire address. You'll find that it's also hosted on Amazon AWS services, so that's pretty cool. But we definitely need to make sure in our application that we have a const of Redis URL that is set to this remote address. However, we only want to connect to this if we're in a production environment. In other words, if we're not in development. So let's check the is development flag. And if this is true, we're going to run the local Redis URL. So it also uses the Redis protocol, but we're going to connect to localhost, whose address is 1.27.0.1:6379. So the port of the local Redis server is 6379. And the key is that we want our pub/sub implementation to use this Redis URL as the new default. So let's place this above all of our local object creations. So we have the Redis URL up there, and we might as well group the default port and the root node address in there as well. So we have the Redis URL, the default port, and the root node address. And now we want to pass this into the pub/sub. Keys in JavaScript are by convention camel case, so we'll maintain that. But this key is going to be mapped to the Redis URL value, so make sure to pass that in. All right, and now in our pub/sub implementation, so at pub/sub.js, we also have this Redis URL to work with now. So there's the Redis URL, and let's pass that into the clients. So there's Redis URL there, in the publisher as well as the subscriber. So definitely have those crucial pub/sub changes, and in the index.js file, make sure to have the Redis URL set to the overall address as well. All right, make sure to save all of that. Now, Heroku is going to use the local Git project in order to run the production code. So we need to add these local changes with git add -a. Let's make a commit message for this with git commit -m, and let's say configure production code. All right, so we should see a lot of changes have been added to the Git project, but the final thing we want to run is git push Heroku master, which will take our new local version of the Git project, push it to the Heroku Git source control version, and then Heroku is going to pick up those changes and then use that as the source code. Cool, so it's running. Heroku has detected a Node.js application. It's installing the Node modules from the package.json dependencies list, as well as the more full-out version in the packagelock.json file. All right, this should take some short time, so pause here and return to the video when yours is complete. All right, once it's done, you should see that your address has been deployed to Heroku. Awesome. A command you definitely want to run is Heroku logs --tail. This will show you the output of the running Express application at the remote address. All right. Hopefully you see that the build has succeeded and is starting the process with the npm start command. This is the output of Parcel actually creating all the local assets for the front end. So there's the HTML, the CSS, as well as the JavaScript. All right, cool. So you can go ahead and kill this Heroku logs tail and then run Heroku open. And as you run Heroku open, it'll open it up on the browser. And eventually you should see this output that says, welcome to the blockchain. So here our application is now available on a public URL. How cool. But the key is making sure that multiple instances of this overall production application can work together in a network. So next up, let's look at how to start up multiple instances of this application so that way they can all work together, even in a public environment. Okay, let's do that next.